Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Knee Knits. My name is Amy. I'm a knitter. We talk about all things knitting here, and today we have a podcast episode, and it's podcast number 8. Hello, welcome. Like I said before, my name's Amy, and we have a knitting podcast. I'm very excited to share with you guys everything I've been working on and knitting up for the past 2 weeks. I'm kind of enjoying, I'm on like the every 2-week schedule now for podcasts, and I think it's really fun. It's like short enough where, you guys get regular updates and can see more incremental progress, but it's not too far apart where you guys miss stuff, because I do knit a lot, and I feel like a lot can happen in a month in between episodes. So here we go, getting into the 2-week swing. Last time I saw you guys, I was knitting the body of my Monday sweater, and you'll notice that I am now wearing it. So this is my first finished object of the episode. Well, it's my only finished object. Yeah, well, big finish object, I guess. I finished my Monday sweater. This is a pattern by Petite Knit. I started it back in January. I think I started it around the same time I started my Moby sweater. If you guys have been following me, you guys know I did finish the Moby sweater a few weeks ago. So although I do have 2 back-to-back finished sweaters, I did not finish the Moby sweater, cast this on, and then somehow finish it in 2 weeks. They have been kind of simultaneously going on. So yeah, here it is. So this Monday sweater I knit in Sandnesgarn Sunday, held together with a strand of Sandnesgarn tin silk mohair. Sunday is a light fingering weight 100% merino wool, and tin silk mohair is a silk mohair. I don't remember the breakdown of the fibers, but it does also include some wool in addition to the silk and the mohair, which I know is a little bit different than other brands mohair that's out there. But overall, I really enjoyed knitting this sweater. It's like a DK weight gauge, so I knit this on 4mm needles, and it's just a basic raglan knit in the round, top down. There's some German short rows to shape the neckline, which I really like, and the ribbing accents are 1x1 rib. So yeah, I just finished this earlier this week. It literally just finished drying this morning. I've been blocking it, and I really like the fit of it. Overall, the Monday sweater is kind of like an oversized, comfy, basic sweater. I would kind of compare it to like a crew neck sweatshirt, and I work remotely for my full-time job. Like, I work from home here, and I wear crew neck sweatshirts on the daily. They're just really comfortable and warm, and I like just throwing them on whatever I have as like an extra layer. And so I feel like this sweater has kind of the same vibe. It has that boxy fit. It has a lot of ease. The pattern suggested ease is about 6 to 8 inches. I did not make measurements of this before I put it on, so I don't actually know how much ease that I'm wearing it with right now, but I would guess, because I was on gauge with the pattern, that I'm probably around 6 inches of positive ease here. It's very warm. Like, I'm kind of getting warm in it right now because of the mohair, but I am overall really happy with the finished result. One of the things I really love about this sweater is the color. Now look at this navy. It is absolutely gorgeous. I really wanted a really deep navy, and I found that in the Sandnesgarn Sunday. It was like a very deep inky navy, and the tin silk mohair, although was not as deep, I really like how it added some sort of variegation to the whole sweater overall that you can sort of see up close and afar, but it's not like in your face different colors. I believe the color of the Sunday that I used is marine blue, and the color of the tin silk mohair is deep marine. So that's how this combo turned out. I'm gonna try and show you guys up close to sort of see the yarn combination. You guys can see that there. But yeah, it's really nice. It fits really well. I like this neckline. I like crew necks. I'm a crew neck girl for sure. And I think it's very comfy. I haven't put any elastic in it yet, but I do plan to, because this is 1x1 rib that could stretch out over time. But I do like, where it sits. It's not too high, but it's also not too low either. And the German short row shaping really helped shape the back a little bit. You might not be able to see much of like a difference, but I'm just showing off like the raglan. It's really nice. I'm a big fan of raglans. Some other design notes of this sweater: it did have a pretty long like ribbing cuff. So you can see on the sleeve here, just compared to other sweaters I've made, this is a pretty long ribbed cuff. I think it's almost 5 inches long. At first I thought it looked a little funny because when I was knitting the sleeve, you know, the ribbing compresses on itself and it just seemed like a lot of ribbing that was squeezing compared to the rest of the sleeve. But after I blocked it, it relaxed out a bit and, you know, I think it looks kind of nice. Yeah. Long ribbing and same thing on the cuff. I did knit this to the suggested body length and the suggested sleeve length. And if you've seen the video clip of me actually wearing the sweater, it fits pretty well. It definitely hits like exactly where I want it to be. I usually wear high-waisted pants and it comes past, you know, the waistline of my high-waisted pants pretty well. The sleeves, as you can see, I've been holding them up all for this whole filming episode, and I really like the length, you know, past the wrist a little bit. I can pull them up if I wanted to, and I think the ribbing helps with that. So I did knit this to the suggested body length and sleeve length. Just for reference, I am 5'0" tall, so I'm pretty short, and everything fit really well on me. And usually I do shorten bodies and sleeves by just like a little bit to be more proportional to my height. So just something to note, if you're taller, maybe the suggested body length and sleeve length would be a little short on you or a little too small, so just keep that in mind. Following the pattern gauge, the pattern suggested yarn, and the pattern suggested sizing, like dimensions of the sweater, I used a little bit under 5 balls of each the Sandnesgarn Sunday and the Sandnesgarn Tin Silk Mohair, and those are the Sunday is in a 50-gram ball, and then the Tin Silk Mohair is a 25-gram ball, which again is pretty standard with a lot of commercial, you know, fingering weight merinos and silk mohairs. Now this is a pretty basic raglan crew neck. A ton of designers have different versions of a raglan crew neck. I have had some questions or curiosities about the big differences between this Monday sweater and maybe like Petite Knit's No Frills sweater, which is her other raglan crew neck sweater. I was also curious and looking into some other patterns that had similar weight yarn and a similar finish result. I found the Knit Pearl Girls Semper sweater, which I almost used for this yarn before I settled on the Monday sweater. Now, I've only knit this Monday sweater, so all of the referencing to the other patterns, I'm just taking information from the pattern descriptions, not actually having knit them themselves. So the No Frills sweater uses the same exact yarn and the same exact gauge as the sweater. The suggested ease on the sweater for the Monday sweater is 6 to 8 inches, whereas the suggested ease for the No Frills sweater is 6 inches. So we're still pretty similar there. Some design characteristics: the No Frills sweater uses includes a single layer collar, so it's not folded, it's not doubly as thick. And the raglan line on the No Frills sweater is a single stitch raglan, where the Monday sweater you have a multi-stitch raglan. If you guys can see, there's like more than one stitch that goes between the raglan increases, which adds, you know, a little bit of a difference in design, not entirely. And like I said before, with the Monday sweater, you have pretty long ribbing on the cuffs as well as the bottom band. The ribbing on the No Frills sweater is shorter, but the No Frills sweater and the Monday sweater, I think overall are pretty much the same, pretty similar. I don't want to speak out of turn because I haven't knit the No Frills sweater, but I think if you have one of those patterns and want to make the other one, you probably could adapt it without buying the second one. In terms of comparing it to the Semper sweater by the Knit Pearl Girl, again, I have not knit that pattern, so I'm just going off of what I've read in the pattern description and in the pictures on the pattern pages. The Semper sweater, it looks like it has less stitches in the neckline, because in all of the pattern photos I've seen, the neckline is a little bit higher and a little bit tighter around people's necks compared to this Monday sweater. So if you're looking for a tighter neckline, go with the Semper sweater. If you're looking for a more open neckline, go with the Monday sweater. Again, same gauge, a DK weight gauge with a fingering held with a mohair is the suggested yarn. Now the big difference is in the ease. The Semper sweater only calls for 2 to 4 inches of positive ease, where compared to the Monday sweater is 6 to 8. So you have a large difference there. Again, nothing you can't adapt to. If you want 6 to 8 inches of positive ease on the Semper sweater, you just size up. Similar to the No Frills sweater, the Semper sweater does have shorter ribbing on the cuffs and the band. So those are just some thoughts on the raglans, just from a pattern description. I know there's so many knitting patterns out there that are pretty similar. So usually when I am trying to compare patterns, I look at gauge, of course, you know, what size needles is it calling for? What type of yarn is it calling for? and then ease, as well as construction style. So it's pretty easy to end up with similar patterns, so hopefully that gives you some insight into the minor differences between those three patterns that have, in the end, a pretty similar finished result. All right, so let's get into my works in progress. I have a few things on the needles. So one of the current projects I'm working on is the Town Sweater by Ozetta. So I'm making the Town Sweater as kind of like a mini knit along with two of my close friends. We're all knitting the same sweater together in the same yarn, although different colored yarn. So it is a very beginner friendly sweater. The construction is bottom up in the round. This is it so far. So I have finish the bottom part of the body. It is hard to hold up right now because I have like this big panel, but basically I have knit the body up to the underarms, and then we split into two panels, the front and the back panel, and knit flat for each of those. So this is the back panel. I just reached the back neck length, so I'm about to do some shaping around the back of the neck, and then I'm gonna go back, pick up these stitches that are on hold for the front, and then knit the front. And yeah, so pretty fun sweater. This is a worsted weight pattern. I'm knitting it on 5mm needles with the Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted. You can see I'm like almost done with this ball of yarn here, but this is the yarn I'm using, Wool of the Andes worsted. The color is Crane Heather. I really like this color. It's like a cool toned gray beige color, and it's heathered, so you can see all of those really nice minor color nuances that look really nice in the finished fabric. Show this up close as well. Wool of the Andes worsted is the first time I've used a yarn from Knit Picks. I've heard of them and I've heard great things about them, and this Wool of the Andes worsted is a very economical yarn. It's 100% Peruvian wool, sold in 50-gram balls, and each ball, I think, is about $4 US, and if they have sales, you can get it for even less. So I was really excited to find this yarn and actually find that it's really nice to knit with. Like, I would totally and am probably going to use this again. They have so many different colors to choose from, like I talked about before. So overall, great thoughts on the yarn. So next time you see this, it'll probably look more like a sweater. I know it's kind of hard to visualize right now. It kind of is just a big blob of like a knitted rectangle, but yeah, I've been enjoying this knit. Definitely like a mindless knit. It feels like it's flying by because I have not knit something worsted weight in so long. I've been on the DK weight train for a ton of projects recently, like 4mm needles or smaller. So this really feels like it's flying. I'm really enjoying using the yarn, and I can't wait to finish it. I'm also trying to finish it quickly because the winter is almost over, which I'll talk about more later on in this episode. But, you know, sweater season's almost coming to an end, so I'm hoping I can finish it and get a few wears on it, few wears of it before it gets too warm. All right, next project. Let's pull it out. So I have been working on the Uppbót Cardigan, which is a pattern by Istex for their magazine. And I've been doing it as part of a knitting class at my local yarn store. So we are having 3 sessions and sort of walking through all the major steps of this cardigan. It is knit in Lopi, Alafas Lopi, which is Istex's bulky weight Icelandic wool, 100% Icelandic wool. So this is a stranded colorwork cardigan. It's worked in the round, as you can see, but then we steek it at the end. So we're going to cut down the middle to open it up and create that cardigan shape. It is knit bottom up, and yeah, this is my progress so far. I have not done a lot of color work. I have done some like a long time ago, but in terms of like recent knitting, this is probably my first major color work project. Wanted to take this class because there was a lot of new stuff going on, and already we've had 1 session and the teacher walked us through all of the major things we can expect as we go through the pattern, and she gave a lot of helpful insight on what to do at different parts, and it's been really fun. So our like task for the next class is to come with the body knitted up to the underarm, and as well as both of the sleeves knitted up to the underarm. Because it is bottom up, you knit those 3 separate pieces, or you knit those pieces separately, and then we're gonna put them all together in the round to sort of continue the yoke in the next class. So let's talk about the yarn I'm using for this project. Like I said before, this is Alafas Lopi. So I am using 3 different colors. The color, the accent color I'm using is called Ash Gray or Gray Heather. I don't remember the exact names, but this gray is going at the bottom band, and it's also going to be the color of like the button band and the collar. So that's why a lot of this is gray. However, the main body of this sweater is going to be blue. This is like indigo blue. It's a really nice heathered blue yarn, and you can see I just started getting into some of the blue. I'm just not quite into a lot of blue yet in the pattern. And then my other accent color is this white heather. I think this one is called Ash Heather and the other one's called gray. But overall, it's going to be a really nice wintry sweater or cardigan. I keep saying sweater, but I mean cardigan. It's really thick. Like I said, it's bulky weight. So I'm knitting this on 6.5mm needles. And let me just show you guys the color work up close. I'm not very far, so it is, you know, not much to show, but enough to, you know, put it on the podcast. So I am knitting this with the two-stranded color work technique of holding one color of the yarn in each of my hands. This is a two-stranded colorwork pattern, meaning even though there's 3 colors for any given row, you're only doing a maximum of 2 colors at the same time, which is helpful for someone who's on the newer side to color work. So you only have to manage 2 colors instead of 3 all at once. So I am holding one color in my left hand and knitting it English style. I'm a left-handed knitter, so when I throw with my left hand, it's considered English style. And then I'm holding the other color in my right hand and picking it continental style to sort of maintain tension in the floats pretty well by holding them at the same time. I was kind of scared of this technique at first. When the teacher suggested it, I was like, oh boy, that's a lot. But it turned out that it's not that bad. And I know, my tension's not perfect. I mean, I've definitely seen already there's some stitches that I think got pulled a little bit too tight, but overall, like I think it's fine. I'm not really sure, but I can tell that it's not even close to being perfect, but I think it's pretty good, you know? Definitely, like there's definitely room for improvement, but it's not bad. So yeah, I'm excited. I really like seeing the pattern grow. I did have to restart this like a couple times because my gauge was off. The pattern called for 4.5mm needles for the ribbing band and then 6mm needles for the body. So I had knit the bottom band with the 4.5mm needles and my suggested cast on stitches for my size, and it just looked way too small. And I had gotten right into the body when I decided, like, yeah, this is too tight. I need to go up some needle sizes. And also knowing that when you knit stranded color work, tension does tend to get tighter. So I was like, all right, I gotta bump up my needle size for sure, just to make sure it doesn't end up too small or too tight. So I frogged the whole thing. I had done maybe like a couple inches and cast it on instead with, I did 5.5mm needles for the ribbing, and then I'm doing 6.5mm needles for the body. If you're not familiar with Icelandic wool, it is a very rustic wool, but it's definitely gonna be a very like hardy wearing wool cardigan. Like it's gonna be super warm in the winter. I do think it's funny that by the time I finish this cardigan, it's probably gonna be April, and that's probably going to be too warm to wear it, although you never know here in New England. But I'm just assuming this is like a deep winter kind of project to wear, and we're finishing in April, but that's okay. I'll have a nice warm cozy cardigan to wear first thing next winter when it gets cold, so that's good. I've been noticing that I kind of want to be more ahead of the game with knitting seasonally, and I did say that before this year, and somehow I'm still not caught up, but like I just finished this mohair wool Monday sweater, and although it's still cold here, it's definitely getting a little bit warmer, so like I'm not going to get as many wears as this as if compared to if I finished it in like January. So knowing that spring is coming, I think I want to be a little bit more on top of, you know, starting winter knits like earlier in the summer, if that makes sense, because the fall gets pretty cold here pretty quickly. So like I want to have sweaters done before like October, which means I'd have to start them in August or September. So I'm just going to keep that in mind as the year goes on to sort of be ahead of the game with knitting the woolly knits so they can be ready to go when it gets cold. I am really glad that this sweater is bulky because of all the new techniques. I don't really have to worry about, knitting quickly because there's a lot of stitches. Like if it was a smaller gauge, this might be a little bit more tedious, might be a little bit more difficult. But probably as with anyone learning to knit, you start with the bulkier yarns and then you tend to get smaller as you get more experienced. So I'm glad that I'm doing this color work in the bulky yarn because it's going really quickly and it's like easy to learn, easy to handle, like in my hands. And yeah, it's been really fun. Overall, really enjoying the Uppbót cardigan. The other cardigan I have on my needles is the Oversized Seasons cardigan. This is also a pattern by Ozetta. Now, if you've been watching my podcast, you've seen this before. This is probably my longest ongoing whip for this year. I definitely started it last year, like in 2022. I don't remember which month, but it was definitely in like the fall-ish. So this has been on my needles for a while, and I've talked about how I have not been enjoying working on it because it is half fisherman's rib, and half fisherman's rib grows in length really slowly because you're knitting into the row below and it compresses the rows. So when you're trying to reach a certain amount of like inches in length, you have to knit more rows to get that length. So it's growing very slowly, and every time I work on it, I get a little bit discouraged because I could work on it for like an hour and only see like this much of growth, which is difficult for me. Like, I don't know, it's just very slow moving and I haven't been too tempted to work on it. I do really want the finished product. I think that this is such a beautiful cardigan in terms of my fashion, wardrobe, and lifestyle. I definitely can see myself wearing this a lot. It's a nice neutral gray color and it just seems like a really cozy layer to throw on over anything else. So I don't necessarily want to frog it. Like, I'm still working on it and I'm just trying to push myself to get it done. So I have made some progress on it. If you have seen this before, you can tell it's a little bit longer. We are moving along on the body. So I think I'm a little bit more than halfway done with the body length. You can see where I have some stitch markers. These are where the buttons are going to go. So I have 2 button placements or 2 buttonholes, and I think there are 4 buttonholes total, or 5. I hope there's 4 and not 5. But yeah, we're making some progress. I do like working with the yarn. So this yarn is Lana Grossa Cool Merino in the color gray. This is a really nice chainette wool. It's pretty high merino content, probably like, I never remember the percentages. I think it's like 90-something% merino and just a little bit of nylon. It's chainette construction, so it's very light and fluffy. You get like a lot of volume for not a lot of weight. And I do like the subtle variegation in the yarn. I think it plays really well with this half fisherman's rib. I'll try it on for you guys. So yeah, this is what I have so far, and like I put it on and I'm like, yeah, that's super cute. Can't wait to wear that. So I just gotta force myself to finish it and work on it. Now that I finished the Monday sweater, I have less on my needles and I'm definitely more open to working on this, especially as the weather gets warmer. I think also in the winter, I'm not too motivated to knit cardigans because I find myself drawn to pullovers more. But now that spring is coming, cardigans are more likely to be worn by me because, the temperature's changing a lot. Sometimes you want a t-shirt, sometimes you want long sleeves, and that's where the t-shirt cardigan combo comes in. So I can see myself finishing this maybe by April. I don't really want to give myself a deadline, but I'm making progress and I think it's going to go by quickly once the body is done and I'm just working on the sleeves. So yeah, hopefully next time I share with you guys this project, there's going to be more progress on it. All right, so I also started a pair of socks. I really like knitting socks and I think it's fun to kind of have like a sock on the needles at all times. So I started a sock for Nick, and this is in the Lion Brand Sock Ease yarn. So this is Lion Brand Sock Ease. I bought this a while ago with like a Lion Brand coupon from their website. Lion Brand doesn't normally stock sock yarns. This is a like from the vault yarn, so I think it's limited time only, but Sock Ease, it's a very like economical, budget-friendly sock yarn. You get 100 grams of fingering weight sock yarn. It's a 75-25, I believe. Yeah, 75% wool, 25% nylon. You get 100 grams of it, and I think it retails for like $10. So if you can hit up a sale, it's even less than that, which is a pretty good deal compared to other sock yarns. Now, knowing that it is like a more budget-friendly sock yarn, it does feel, let's just talk about how it feels a little bit. It's on the rougher side. It's definitely not silky smooth. If you use like hand-dyed superwash sock yarn, that stuff feels like super buttery smooth and like velvety. This does not have that same feel at all. It is a 4-ply. I'll show the yarn up close. So this is 4-ply yarn, and knitting with it, I've really enjoyed knitting with it. Although it doesn't have that like buttery smooth feeling that other sock yarns have, I think it's pretty cool. This is a self-striping yarn, so I'm doing the Vanilla Socks pattern by the Crazy Sock Lady. It's the same vanilla sock pattern that I've used before for my other socks. I do want to venture more into like textured and fun socks, so I was actually going to knit like a textured sock with this yarn, and I had started on the cuff, and then realized it was self-striping with like these very long stripes. I was looking at the ball. I thought it was going to be kind of variegated with all of these different colors. This is the color Dark and Stormy. It's got navies, greens, sort of like olive greens, and the creams. But when I started knitting it and realized that it was like pretty self-striping, I was like, okay, I can't really do a textured pattern with this because you wouldn't be able to see it. So I just went along and did a vanilla sock. So this has a standard slip stitch heel flap and gusset. Yeah, I'm excited to see how it blocks and excited to see like how it wears. Like, although it is like rougher to the feel, I wonder if that means it'll be more sturdy than other sock yarns. I'm not too versed in different sock yarns. I would love to try more, both commercial and like hand-dyed yarns. I've felt at the yarn store like the Isager sock yarn. That's like so soft. Like I've never felt anything like that. So I definitely want to try that. Compared to like Filcolana or Weta, this is definitely like more rusticy feeling compared to, oh, I shared last week, I do have a skein of the Knit Picks Hawthorne sock yarn. This is definitely a little bit rougher than Hawthorne, but Hawthorne is still rougher to the feel than like the Superwash Filcolana or Superwash hand-dyed Barocco's vintage sock yarn. I think that's relatively new. I've also felt that at the yarn store. Feeling it at the yarn store, the Barocco vintage sock also is a lot softer. So keep that in mind. I think the price points though are pretty comparable to like the softness scale. Like this is probably the cheapest sock yarn I've encountered. It's on the rougher side. The more expensive ones are softer. So some thoughts on different sock yarns. I am knitting these on a 9-inch circular needle. Those are my favorite needles to use for socks. This is a US size 1, 2.25 millimeter. So this is casted on with 72 stitches. Last time I tried to make him a sock, I used 64 stitches and it was too tight. So I'm hoping 72 is like the sweet spot for his size. All right, let's get into some future plans. So like I said before, I don't have a lot on the needles right now compared to like my normal amount. So I feel like I kind of have an open canvas for what I can cast on next. And I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of yarn stash that I am really eager to dive into. So one of the sweaters that I've always wanted to make since it was released was the Dartmoor sweater by Cardi. It's a drop shoulder sweater and it has this beautiful detail that goes down the shoulder that I've been really drawn to. And I also just really loved the green color that she's wearing in the sample photos. So the yarn that I have in my stash for that sweater is here. So I was gifted this yarn by the Twisted Pearl Yarn Studio, who I will link below. They are a small yarn shop in Canada, and they also have a website that ships. So I was gifted this Lanes du Nord Vasto yarn. So this is 100% Italian merino. It's made in Italy and it's this beautiful green. I believe the color is called bottle or bottle green, color number 11. And this is a heavy worsted weight merino yarn, and I was hoping to have it meet gauge for the Dartmoor sweater. The Dartmoor sweater gauge I feel like is difficult to meet. She holds a worsted weight with a silk mohair and gets about 15 stitches per 4 inches. Now, I don't really want to use mohair for this sweater. I just feel pretty mohaired out, and I am eager to knit some sweaters without mohair, and you know, it's also more cost effective. So I did do a gauge swatch of this yarn at the 15 stitches. You can see here in the camera, depending on like what's behind it, it's a little see-through. Like the stitches are not as dense as I want them to be, but like if you hold it from afar, you can't really tell. And this was like 4 inches. So it's like, this meets the 4-inch gauge, but it's like, do I like the airiness of the fabric? Now that's the question that I have to answer before I cast on the sweater. Now, the reason I'm like probably going to end up casting it on anyway is because I have this yarn in a sweater quantity. I don't have any other yarn that would be close to gauge. I don't really have a lot of worsted yarn or Aran weight yarn in my stash. This is pretty much the only thing I had that would work. So in the sense of not wanting to buy new yarn for the project, I might just cast on and see what happens. Now I could try and mess around a little bit with the numbers. I could go down a needle size and then go up a sweater size to compress the fabric a little bit, but still get the finished size that I want. That brings into question, well, do I have enough yarn to do that? So I have some thinking, maybe some crunching numbers to do before I cast on the sweater, but I am really excited to use this. I mean, it's such a pretty green. It's like a nice forest green. It's kind of like matte. This yarn is 2-ply. I'll just show the yarn strand up close. It's a 2-ply, pretty fluffy, very soft. This Lanes du Nord brand is new to me, so I'm excited to try it out and see how it knits. Now, if I don't decide to do the Dartmoor sweater with this yarn, I might just pick another sweater that fits this yarn gauge better. If you have any worsted weight sweater pattern ideas, let me know. Like I said before, I've been pretty heavy on the DK weight train, so I have a lot of DK weight sweater patterns saved in my favorites and queue, but in terms of worsted weight, I don't have a whole lot. So if you have any suggestions, let me know. Again, preferably things that meet gauge without mohair. The thing is, like, adding a lace weight mohair would fill in all of these gaps, but it's like, do I want to buy more mohair? Yeah, that's one thing I'm trying to figure out with this yarn and the Dartmoor sweater. There are also a couple of small projects I've been like dying to cast on. And the other question is it too late? Is March too late to knit mittens? Is March too late to knit hats? I don't know, but I want to make them both. And I feel like I should just cast them on now so I can like quickly finish them and have them done and maybe wear them like once or twice before it gets too warm. So I talked about last week, I got some Knit Picks Felici worsted at a yarn swap here in Boston. This is a self-striping superwash wool yarn, and I really want to make like the world's simplest mittens pattern by Tin Can Knits. That's free on Ravelry. It's a great pattern. I haven't knit it before, but it looks great because it has instructions for like every weight yarn, like fingering, DK, worsted. So I would follow the worsted weight mitten pattern for this one. It makes pretty thick block stripes with all of these colors. This is the color Vegas Baby. Really bright and fun. And I thought just like a nice, really bright and fun pair of mittens would be a cool thing to add to my winter wardrobe. So I want to cast these on. Will I wear them once I'm done with them? Probably not, because we haven't really gotten much snow. But will be fun to have. So that's one project I want to cast on. I've also been dying to knit another beanie for myself. I had finished the Bothy hat for Nick last time I shared with you guys on YouTube, and so now I'm like, all right, I want a new beanie for myself. And I feel like everyone has been making Oslo hats by Petite Knit this season. So I've been really wanting to cast on an Oslo hat. I have had this Peer Gynt in my stash for a while now. This is Peer Gynt by Sannes Garn. Okay, making sure it's right side up. This is Peer Gynt by Sannes Garn. I actually picked this up on a trip to Sweden for work like 2 years ago. So I've had this in my stash for a while. I only picked up 3 balls, which is pretty much only enough to make a hat. It's definitely not enough to make a sweater. It's not enough to make a vest. Pretty awkward amount. So I want to make the Oslo hat with this. I have not knit with the Peer Gynt before, and I'm really curious to try it, especially since Petite Knit has been releasing a ton of sweater patterns lately that suggest Peer Gynt. This is a DK weight 100% Norwegian wool. If you have knit with Santa's Garn Sunday or Double Sunday, that's a merino wool. This is Norwegian wool. So it is a little bit rougher in terms of like initial feel. It's definitely not as soft as the merino, but I've heard that this yarn like lasts forever. Like you knit something out of this Norwegian wool and like your grandkids will be able to wear it because it's like very hardy, very long wearing, very like high quality. So I would love to make an Oslo hat with this. I'm on the green kick with the Dartmoor sweater. So yeah, I want to cast on an Oslo hat. I don't know when. I don't know what will come first, the mittens or the Oslo hat. We'll see. All right, I'm sorry, I'm mentioning the seasons like for the 20th time this episode, but now it's more relevant because I'm thinking about future plans, what I want to knit, what's in my queue, what's in my stash, what patterns do I want to make. So I was trying to think ahead, like spring and summer is coming. A lot of people are starting to talk about spring and summer knits, especially those who live in warmer states or climates than I do. So I'm trying to think ahead. What do I want to knit? And the thing is, I'm not the biggest fan of summer knits. Like cottons and linens and silks, they're not my favorite to work with. I am a wool girl all the way. I knit a few summer pieces last summer and I felt like, not that they were a waste of time, but I felt like I would have preferred spending my time knitting wool sweaters or cardigans instead of the little tank tops and the t-shirts. That's just my personal preference. And in terms of wearing them, I also found that I didn't really wear my summer knits as much as I wear my winter and fall knits. So I was like, okay, I know I want to get more into socks. I just mentioned before that I want to get more into textured socks. I want to get more into hand-dyed sock yarn because there's so many beautiful varieties out there with like variegated yarns and speckled yarns and sock sets and colorwork socks. And I also have been watching Typical Bliss, and she's knitting a bunch of socks from the 52 Weeks of Socks book by Lina Publishing. And I'm like, wow, I really want those socks. I think they'd be really fun to knit. So I'm trying to get more into textured socks. I think that's going to be one focus of my knitting journey this upcoming spring. And also, I think I want to knit more cardigans. Like I said before, cardigans are really practical for me to wear in the spring and even the summer, because if you stay out at night in the summer, it does get cool. And I like how you can like put on and take off a cardigan whenever you want because you'll have something on underneath. It's not like a pullover where you're stuck in it all day. Consider me influenced. I follow Knits by Mandy here on YouTube as well as Midsummer Knits Dream, two YouTube knitting channels that I'll link down below. They have both been recommending Knits by Mandy knit the Whitmoor cardigan, and Emma from Midsummer Knits Dream recommended it on her spring patterns video. So I'm like, wow, that's really cute. I want to make that. I really like the lace work. It's a circular yoke, which I have not knit that many circular yokes, so it would be something different to keep me engaged. And it's a DK weight cardigan. And I have some DK weight yarn and stash that I have not known what to do with yet. So I was like, this is perfect. I know what pattern I want to knit. I have the yarn. So let me grab the yarn I'm going to use for it. So this is Sorella Yarns Classic DK in the color Townhouse. This is from their Autumn in New York collection. It's this beautiful, very slightly nuanced cream color. Now you might not be able to see the color changes in the skein, but don't worry, I swatched. So I've been trying to figure out if the yarn will work for the gauge and the pattern, and it definitely will. It was just a matter of what needle size I was going to use. So I have my two swatches here. I use these blocking boards from Knit Picks. They have grids. These are 1-inch lines, and I love them. If you are someone who likes to make things very precise in your blocking, like I find them very helpful with like lining up the bottom edge of like a sweater to make sure it's all in line. And then you can also use this as like a ruler. So I always have my swatches, my 4x4-inch swatches on the blocking boards like this. So I knit this swatch in 4mm needles with the suggested gauge for the Whitmoor cardigan. So you can see it's a little bit smaller than 4x4 inches. So then I went up a needle size. This is knit in 4.5mm needles. I just knit it this morning. It is still wet, which is why there's a huge color difference in the two swatches. It's the same yarn. This is just completely dry and this is wet. But let me show you the color variegation. So like I said before, this is by Sorella Yarn, the color Townhouse. And I think in the swatch you can see the color variation a lot better than in the skein. And I've been holding on to this yarn since I got it last December, and I knew I needed like a really good pattern for the yarn. This is like my first major hand-dyed yarn purchase, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting caught in the trap of like, oh, the yarn is too pretty to use. So I'm really glad that I think this yarn is going to work out great for the pattern because it's a neutral and it's not too variegated that it's going to distract from the lace pattern in the cardigan. I think it's going to accent it quite nicely. And the gauge is going to work. It's very soft. Yeah, so I'm getting eager to cast that on because all I have to do is just get the pattern and cast it on since I have the yarn. But I'm telling myself that I should finish the other cardigan that's on my needles before I cast that one on. So I said before that I'm not too motivated to finish the Oversized Seasons cardigan. It's not been my favorite project to work on, but knowing that I have another cardigan that I'm excited about waiting for me, I think that's going to help me push me along to finish that one. So stay tuned for updates on that upcoming cardigan pattern project. And that's all I have to share with you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to me already, I would love for you if you did and gave this video a thumbs up. I would also love if you could follow me on Instagram if you want to see more up-to-date updates on what I'm working on and my knitting projects. I'm on Instagram pretty frequently, so feel free to check me out there as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.